How can we choose a good K for k-means clustering? Choose the number of clusters by visually inspecting your data points. So this can be one option, because if we have some priori knowledge or we have the knowledge of the domain or the problem, we can have a visual look on the scatter plot of the data samples, and we can see, okay, by having some visual inspection, we can see that these number of clusters will be required for this data sample. On the other hand, the another technique can be used is the elbow method. So in elbow method, first of all, we compute the sum of squared errors, which is SSE, for some values of k, for example 2, 4, 6 or 8, right? So we select some values for k which can be 2, 4, 6 or 8, and we calculate the sum of squared errors. The sum of square error is defined as the sum of the squared distance between each member of the cluster center and its centroid. So each member or each data sample which is present in the cluster, its distance or the square distance will be calculated with its centroid. So mathematically we can represent it as that the sum of square error is equals to that a single data point with its centroid. So we are basically calculating the distance, the square root of distance and their summation for each data point in the cluster to its centroid or the cluster center. If you plot k against the SSE, so now we are basically plotting k, which is the value for the total number of cluster and the sum of square error. We will see that the error decreases at k gets larger. So in this plot you will see that as you increase the value of k, the error between the cluster center and the centroid will start on decreasing. This is because when the number of cluster increases, they should be smaller, so distortion is also smaller, right? The idea of the elbow method is to choose the value of k at which the SSE decreases abruptly, right? So let's understand this concept with this figure. So in this figure we have these clusters, number of clusters here. So these are the values of k. So we have values of k as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and up till 14 for this specific problem. And for each value of k we are basically calculating the sum of squared errors, and you will see that when we are increasing the number of clusters, our sum of square errors is basically decreasing, right? Now in this case, k is equals to 6 is the value that the elbow method has selected. Now why elbow method has selected this k is equals to 6 as the optimal number of clusters for this specific example is that you will see that up till 0.6 our the error surface is basically falling very abruptly, but after this 6 there is, you can say, there is a stabilization in the errors, and as the number of clusters increases. So this we need to select this point, which is basically the elbow point or the sweet point, and we can select this point as our value of k. Take into account that the elbow method is an heuristic, and as such it may or may not work well in your particular case, right? So it is a heuristic problem or a heuristic domain, so we cannot sure or we cannot give 100% guarantee that this elbow method will be working perfectly for any problem. Sometimes there are more than one elbow, so it can happen that for some problems, depending upon the data set, we can have multiple elbows, and maybe it can also happen that there is no elbow at all. So in such kind of situations, you usually end up calculating the best k by evaluating how well k-means performing in the context of the particular clustering problem you are trying to solve. So in that case, you basically look into the context of the particular problem, and on the basis of that you can basically select the value of k. But if you are lucky to have an elbow generated for your problem, then you can look for this sweet point, and you can see that at what location or what point you have a stabilization in the error surface. So at that point you can select your number of clusters. So for this specific example we can take 6 as the optimal number of clusters. So this is another way to select the value of k for your k-means clustering problem. Another thing which is important in the k-means clustering algorithm is feature scaling, and the feature scaling is basically a pre-processing step which helps to improve the performance of k-means clustering algorithm. Feature scaling is a method which is used to standardize the range of independent variables or features of data. In data processing, it is also known as data normalization and is generally performed during the data preprocessing step. So, as far as I remember, I have already discussed the pre-processing steps for our machine learning pipeline, and in the machine learning pipeline for the pre-processing steps, I explained what we usually do for the normalization, right? So in normalization, we are basically scaling the values of the features so that we can have standardized range of the independent variables, right? Or and independent variables can be the features which are being extracted from the data set. Since the range of values of raw data varies widely in some machine learning algorithms, objective functions will not work properly without normalization. So the importance of normalization is that we usually have our objective functions in our machine learning pipeline, and if our data is not normalized, then our objective functions may not work properly. So one example of normalization is that, for example, if I am working on some image data set, and the intensity values of the pixels are ranging from 0 to 255, right? Because usually the pixel values of an RGB or grayscale image normally lies between a range of 0 to 555. So in that case, what we do is we basically normalize the range of 0 to 255 between the range of 0 to 1. So this conversion or this changing of range from 0 to 255 to 0 to 1 is basically the normalization thing, and we have simple formulas through which we can basically normalize our data set. So this normalization is very important in machine learning, and specifically if we talk about for the objective functions, then if the data is not normalized, then our objective functions may not work properly. For example, the majority of classifiers calculate the distance between 2 points by the Euclidean distance. So as we have seen that even in k-means clustering, we are basically calculating the distance through Euclidean distance. If one of the features has a broad range of values, the distance will be governed by this particular feature, right? So if some features have small values and other features have very large values, so in that case, if one feature has a broad range of values, then in that case the distance will be governed by this feature, or we can say that the algorithm is biased to that particular feature. Therefore, the range of all features should be normalized. So in order to avoid this kind of situation, we need to have normalized values of all of the features, so that the features contributes approximately proportionately to the final distance. So because if we have the normalized values, only in that case all features will be equally contributing towards the calculation of the final distance. Another problem is that we can be suffering from the curse of dimensionality problem, because it happens when the dimension is too large. As the number of dimensions tends to infinity, the distance between any 2 points in the data set converges. This means the maximum distance and minimum distance between any 2 points of your data set will be the same, right? So in that case, in order to overcome this problem, the solution is to reduce the number of features. So we need to minimize the total number of features which are present in our data set, and there are a number of techniques which we use in order to reduce the dimension or in order to reduce the total number of features. And one of the most promising technique for this purpose is the PCA, which is called as the principal component analysis. So that is beyond the scope of this course, but it's a very important technique which we usually use in order to get rid of the curse of dimensionality problem.